What starts as a book promo turns into one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime TV history. Jada Pinkett Smith arrives on The View, but by the end of the segment, she's escorted out by security. What went so wrong between her and Joy Behar that the interview ended in chaos? Get ready for the full, unfiltered breakdown that left everyone speechless. Hit that subscribe button now, because this is a story you won't want to miss. If you're hooked already, pause for a second and smash that subscribe button. We're just getting started, and trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. Let's get into it. Jada Pinkett Smith stood up, her eyes locked on Joy Behar. The audience gasped. Chairs shifted. A producer waved off-screen for someone to intervene. Security appeared from stage left, not running, but walking with purpose. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every 10th second. Joy's voice rose above the murmurs, sharp and fiery. She pointed at Jada, words slipping out too fast, too raw. Jada's face was unreadable calm, but you could feel the weight behind her silence. One co-host looked down at the table. Another looked straight into the crowd, unsure what to do. The air in the studio felt electric, like something very real had just happened on live television. A camera zoomed in on Jada's hand, resting on the edge of the table. It was steady. That was the only thing in the room that was. A voice from backstage called for a break, but nobody moved. Then Jada spoke. Just a few words, but enough to quiet the whole room. You could almost hear her heart pounding, and maybe Joy's too. There was a pause, then Joy responded, louder this time. Her words cut deep. And just like that, the entire tone of the show collapsed into something none of them could pull back from. The moment felt unreal. This was supposed to be a routine guest segment, a bit of promo, a little back and forth. Instead, it turned into a confrontation that would shake the very reputation of The View itself. Viewers at home froze in disbelief. Some reached for their phones. Clips would go viral before the commercial break ended. So how did this all happen? What started as a simple conversation exploded into a moment so intense, it pushed daytime TV past a point of no return. Let us rewind and find out. Because this story, this clash, has more layers than anyone saw coming. The morning at The View started like any other. The studio buzzed with quiet energy. Crew members moved around with headsets and coffee cups, double-checking lighting and camera angles. In the dressing rooms, makeup artists worked with steady hands. The air smelled like hairspray, coffee, and nerves. Everyone was getting into their zone. Joy Behar sat at the table early, flipping through her note cards. She sipped her coffee, nodded at the producer across the room, and scribbled something down. Her shoulders were stiff. Her eyes moved quickly. From card to card, it was not panic, but it was not relaxed either. You could see she was preparing for something. The other co-hosts arrived, one by one, laughing quietly and exchanging a few warm greetings. The usual chatter filled the studio. As they settled into their seats, jokes, compliments, a little gossip. But something shifted the moment Jada Pinkett Smith walked in. Jada stepped onto the set with a quiet kind of confidence. She smiled politely, waved at the crew, and walked to her chair in heels that echoed across the floor. She wore a deep green blazer, sharp and elegant, and her eyes scanned the room like she was already reading the energy. She knew this was not just another interview. She was ready, but she was guarded. But co-hosts greeted her with smiles, but not all of them seemed genuine. Joy's expression was hard to read. She glanced up, gave a short smile, then went right back to her cards. Jada sat down, crossed her legs, and leaned back slightly, like she had already put up a wall. You could feel it. Something felt off. That this was not going to be an easy conversation. And if you have made it this far, then you know it is about to heat up. So before we get into the fireworks, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one are just getting started, and you will not want to miss what comes next. The segment started off like any other high-profile interview on The View. Joy smiled, thanked Jada for being there, and leaned in with that familiar mix of charm and curiosity. She opened with a light question about Jada's latest book. Jada smiled, gave a quick summary, and nodded as if ready to steer the whole conversation in that direction. But Joy was already shifting. Before Jada could even finish, Joy leaned in closer and said, "You have always talked about transparency, especially when it comes to your marriage. Would you say that writing this book is your most authentic moment yet, or is it more of a publicity strategy?" The room tensed. It was not just the words, it was the tone. But with a bite. Jada paused for a moment. Her smile faded, just slightly. She adjusted in her chair and answered carefully, saying her book was about healing, not headlines. She explained that her story was personal, that she wanted to share the truth on her terms. But Joy was not done. Joy nodded politely, but then said, "Right. But when people hear you and Will were separated for years while keeping up appearances, it makes them wonder, are you being honest now, or were you performing then?" Jada blinked, her jaw tightening for a second before she responded, "I have always been honest. What changed is how much I decided to share." Her voice was measured. But there was a shift. She was no longer promoting, she was defending. Across the table, one of the co-hosts looked down at her notes, clearly uncomfortable. Another leaned back and folded her arms. The vibe in the room had turned. The conversation was no longer about a book. It was about control. Jada tried again to pull it back to the project, talking about women's strength and personal growth. But Joy kept circling, her questions cutting just a little deeper each time. What started as a warm welcome had become a slow burn. You could feel the push and pull between them. It was subtle, but undeniable. A power struggle was unfolding right there in front of the cameras, and it was only just beginning. Jada sat forward. Her posture changed. She was no longer just a guest. She was taking control. She looked straight at Joy and asked calmly, "Why does it feel like you came into this with an agenda?" Joy raised her eyebrows. "Agenda? No, Jada. I am just asking questions your audience wants to know." Jada held her gaze. "No, you are framing this like I owe you an explanation for how I live my life. I do not." The room felt tighter. You could hear a pin drop. Jada continued, her voice firm. "When a black woman speaks her truth, she is often told she is being dramatic, or that she is making it about herself. But if I do not tell my story, someone else will twist it for me." Joy blinked, then leaned back and said, "Oh, come on. Did you just play that card? That is not what this is about." That was the moment. It all tipped. Jada's jaw clenched. That card? No. That reality. I am speaking from experience, not from a script written by someone who has never lived my life. Joy scoffed. "You put it all out there, Jada. You made your marriage, your family, your personal journey public. And now you want to claim privacy." The exchange turned sharp. Jada shot back. "There is a difference between being honest and being exploited. I wrote a book to take my story back. That is not narcissism. That is survival." Joy fired again. "Or maybe it is both. Because it sounds a lot like oversharing, not healing." The co-hosts shifted uncomfortably. Cameras kept rolling. The tension pulled tight. Whoopi leaned forward, trying to ease in. "Let us bring this back for a second. Everyone here respects each other, so let us just..." But it was too late. Joy was already mid-sentence. Jada was not backing down. The energy in the room had reached a boiling point. Every smile was gone. Every layer of daytime politeness had been stripped away. This was no longer just a talk show interview. This was two women standing their ground on live television, and the audience could feel the heat through the screen. Joy leaned in. Her tone was sharp now, no trace of the fake smiles from earlier. She looked right at Jada and said, "At what point does it stop being storytelling and start being exploitation?" Jada froze for a second. You could see the hurt flash in her eyes, but she did not flinch. Her voice stayed calm. "My story is not a brand," she said. "It is my life. My pain has purpose." Joy scoffed, shaking her head. "No, what it looks like is you are using your trauma like a product, like marketing." The audience let out a soft gasp. Some co-hosts looked down. Others shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. Jada sat up straighter. She was not letting that slide. "You have no idea what it feels like to be silenced for years. To have people make jokes about your marriage, your kids, your choices, then turn around and ask you to smile for the cameras." Her voice cracked, just slightly. But she held it together. Joy pushed again. "You are the one who keeps talking about it. You keep going on shows. You keep writing books. How is that not a choice?" Jada's eyes were glassy now. "Because silence hurts more, and telling the truth, even when it is messy, helps other people who feel like they are alone." Joy's face was flushed. Her hands were gripping her cards. She looked ready to explode. "This is not journalism," Jada said quietly. "This is cruelty dressed up like curiosity." The studio fell quiet. It was not a debate anymore. It had become deeply personal. You could feel it. This was not about fame or ratings anymore. It was about who gets to own their story and who gets punished for telling it. Jada wiped one eye. Barely. Joy blinked hard, but did not back down. Two women, two generations, two different definitions of truth, and only one mic between them. Security started moving before anyone gave the order. They must have sensed it. The shift in energy, the kind you feel just before something breaks. Two men in black earpieces stepped onto the stage quietly, like they did not want to interrupt. But the moment their shoes hit the edge of the carpet, everyone tensed. Joy pointed at them without looking. Her voice was low but firm. "She needs to go." Now Jada turned not to Joy, not to security, but to the camera, straight to the people watching at home. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She just spoke with a calm so sharp it cut through the tension like a blade. "Do not let anyone shame you for speaking your truth. Not in your home, not at your job, not on a stage built to tear you down." You could hear the studio fall into total silence. Not even a cough, just stillness. One of the security guards reached out like he was about to guide her by the arm. Jada shook her head gently. "I am leaving, on my own." She stood, smoothed her shirt, and walked off the set slowly, but with purpose. Her heels clicking against the floor were the only sound in the room. The audience was frozen. Some looked stunned. A few had their hands covering their mouths. The co-hosts, they did not move, not right away. Sarah looked down at her lap. Sunny was blinking fast, like she was trying to process what just happened. Whoopi leaned in toward her mic. She forced a smile and tried to shift gears. Well, that was something. We will be right back with more of The View after the break. But the moment was not done yet. Joy leaned into her own mic, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Do not let the door hit you on the way out. Gasps. A few nervous chuckles. And that was it. Jada was gone. But what she left behind. That stayed in the room, a silence filled with questions. A storm that had just passed, but one nobody would forget. When the cameras returned from the break, the energy was completely different. The studio lights were still bright, but the mood had dimmed. There were no more jokes. No more small talk. Just silence. The co-hosts sat quietly, eyes low, hands folded. Nobody spoke for a while. Not even Whoopi. Joy sat alone at the far end of the table. Her usual confidence had slipped. Her back was straight, but her face looked tight, like she was holding something in. Maybe anger, maybe regret, maybe both. The audience did not know what to do. A few people clapped softly, unsure if it was the right moment. Others just looked around, waiting for someone to break the silence. You could feel the awkwardness stretching out across the room. Later, that day, the clip exploded online. Headlines popped up everywhere. Jada storms off The View. Joy Behar faces backlash over heated exchange. The moment Jada stood and spoke to the camera was replayed thousands of times. Social media took sides fast. Hashtags like #TeamJada and #TeamJoy started trending. Some people praised Jada for standing her ground, calling her powerful and brave. Others said she was too sensitive, accusing her of turning a conversation into a spectacle. Clips of the walk-off were turned into TikTok's reaction videos and think pieces. The internet had taken over the narrative, and everyone had an opinion. Some saw it as a necessary clash, old-school media meeting a new kind of voice. Others said it was a lesson in how quickly things can spiral when egos and emotions collide. In the end, it was more than just a viral moment. It became a conversation about how we share pain, how we expect people to behave, and what happens when someone refuses to play by the usual rules. Truth or decorum. Silence or honesty. For some, that walk-off was chaos. For others, it was clarity. And for everyone watching, it was impossible to forget. So, who was right in the end? Was it Joy Behar standing firm in her belief that too much personal exposure crosses the line? Or was it Jada Pinkett Smith, defending her choice to speak openly, to live in full view, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others? On one side, you have the argument that public platforms should be used with restraint, that sharing every detail can blur the lines between honesty and spectacle. On the other side, there is the belief that stories, especially ones filled with pain and growth, deserve to be heard, no matter who feels uneasy hearing them. Joy came in with sharp questions and clear boundaries. Jada responded with vulnerability and fire. Both felt disrespected. Both held their ground. What started as a book promo turned into a raw debate about truth, privacy, and who gets to set the tone on daytime TV. In the end, it was not just about one interview. It was about two women representing two very different ways of living in the spotlight. Two worldviews, one explosive conversation, and an audience forced to choose a side. So, what do you think? Who walked away stronger? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button for more dramatic breakdowns. And let us know, is this truth-telling or too much truth at once?